meets world. Boy meets world. When this boy meets world.
What up, bros?
What up, bros?
And welcome to Bruh Meets World.
When it's bro meets world.
Your boy meets world fan cast. This is episode 94, and I am Siege.
I'm Tony Curtis. What's going on, y'all?
You know what? I'm gonna do something a little bit differently. I'm gonna put our little promo up front, and thank you guys for listening to Bruh Meets World. We've been getting a lot of feedback for all those newcomers on TikTok and all the other places. Thank you so much. We want to make sure to ask you guys to leave us a rating, and then also reach out to us and ask us questions. You know, like if you're asking questions in the rating, whatever you got, definitely. We love to hear back from you. You guys have been very engaging, so just wanted to put that out there and say, if you guys have a question or if you have a prompt that you want us to debate, send it on over, and TC and I will absolutely be here to give you your boy meets world or your bruh meets world needs.
Yeah, especially because we've been going through this show since 2017. Someone started listening to our podcast the other day. They were like, I'm in 2017. It's so long ago. We've been doing this a long time. And I know there's probably, if you're just starting to listen to our podcast now, there's probably episodes that you really love that we've already covered, but maybe you want to have discussions about or questions about. Social media is the perfect place to reach out to us for those. We can talk about things from previous seasons, future seasons, in a way that we can really get into without being confined to the episode format that we work on for the podcast. So yeah, let's get into it, y'all. Boy Meets World. I'm excited to see that there's a growing fan base for this show that we love so much.
Absolutely. And then also, as we have mentioned earlier, we start to get a little bit of color, and we're starting to deal with a little bit more, I'll say, adult issues. So I feel like we're gonna have a lot of audience interaction in those.
I'm so excited for the discussions that are going to come from these adult issues too, because I mean, from social media, we already started. Can I just quickly talk about Angela for a second?
Yeah, absolutely.
We posted something on TikTok recently that was Writer Strong discussing what it was like working in a sitcom during a time when there weren't a lot of interracial relationships, and what the introduction of Angela meant for the show. And I'll play that clip for you guys here.
What was it like being, part of one of the first interracial couples shown on a family sitcom?
And they brought in a couple different actresses for me to read with, and none of them were white. So that was always a conscious choice on the writer's part, because our show was so white. And Trina was amazing. And I think she was an incredibly important addition to the show. In a lot of ways, it's like, you can look at it as like, she was the token black character. But the result of that was, our writers had to hire a black female writer. Because it was like they, mostly older white Jewish guys who were like, how do we write for this young, girl? We ended up being one of the few shows that had a black writer, let alone a female black writer. And Trina became an integral part of the show, and obviously a big part of our fan base too. I think that people, and there was always this question. We did have conversations. Do we address it? Do we talk about it? We went back and forth a lot, and actually, if you could dig it up, Trina wrote an editorial in the LA Times, and she was on the side of not talking about it and not addressing race, because she felt like we were a model for a younger generation that might be hopefully more colorblind. And we had debates, and I'm a little on the fence about it, but the reality is people love the character, and they love the love story, and that's what matters.
I just really love that we're getting to this point where we actually have a person of color on the show, that we can start having these conversations. There was a big debate online whether or not, people felt it was a good thing that, they didn't never really address race on the show, and other people who felt like very strongly that they should have addressed race. I'm sure me and Siege are going to get into it more as we get closer into the Angela and Shawn storyline, but these are just the kind of things that I definitely want to have discussions about. So again, reach out to us on social media and we'll absolutely touch on that.
All right. So thank you guys so much. Let's get into this week's episode.
Oh
I know
boy.
that you guys are very eager to talk about. Season 5 has a lot of notable episodes, and
Was this a notable episode? Like, did you remember this episode at all?
I didn't remember this episode, but I will say that there are scenes from this episode, let's say, that are very popular and online, and I look forward to talking about them.
Here's what I'll tell you. I remembered all of Shawn's story, remembered nothing of Jack and Eric's storyline. So that should just tell you what my brain prioritized and what my brain automatically thought was spam, which I feel is Jack and Eric's storyline. But we'll get into it.
All right, well let's get into it with the tell me about it.
All right. Tell me about it. Jack and Eric start a frat. Shawn's feeling high school is whack, but to get into college, he'll need to pick up some slack.
Good for you. Good
Not
for
my
you.
best. Not my
For
best.
you guys who don't know, he literally did this on the fly. Like we started recording, and he was like, "I don't have one." So I'm gonna say not bad, all things considered.
All right, yo, Jay-Z don't need to write rhymes.
Okay, this is season 5, episode 4, Fraternity Row. After attending a college class and engaging in a winning debate with a professor, an empowered Shawn neglects high school tasks in favor of collegiate ones and gets suspended. Meanwhile, Eric forms his own fraternity, Magnum Pi, and arouses the dean's suspicions. So,
Leo, what are your overall opinions of this episode? Just off the bat.
high level.
High
I
level.
think that it's a very interesting conversation to have, especially that we are starting to discuss college and the importance of college and kind of like the college experience. But it's also a very weird time to talk about college and the college experience, considering we are recording this during a pandemic and college just isn't what it used to be. So I'm always interested to be like,
Yes.
how many of these things like feel relevant now? And I'm talking like specifically right now.
There's a portion of the episode where Shawn is talking about like, I don't need to go in high school. I'm in college. And this whole idea that like he was able to obtain knowledge for free and learn something, but he wouldn't have a degree to prove that he learned it. Doesn't matter. Like that, like there's like things that this episode gets into that are like little nuggets. And I'm like, oh, I want to talk about every part of this. Also, Tony Todd. I need to talk about Tony Todd and everything that Tony Todd is and will be.
What's just Tony Todd? I'm so confused.
Are you kidding me? College professor Tony Todd, Candyman, was Shawn's professor. Bro.
Okay, so sorry. I was sorry. In the roll call, it's Julius Carey as Professor Michaels. So I'm so lost.
Oh, is it Julius Carey? Am I wrong? Yeah. Is it not Tony Todd?
No, thank you.
Oh, I'm racist. I'm racist. Yep. You know what, guys? It gets me. Sometimes it gets me. I sincerely thought that was Tony Todd. Wow.
No,
I'm incredibly embarrassed. Wow, guys, you know what? I apologize. I'm sorry that I don't know. That's a close one, man. I'm looking at this dude right now and like his voice, his look, he still seems pretty Tony Toddish to me, but I'll take it back. Oh my gosh.
Don't try to go ahead.
I'm gonna get a ton of hate.
If I'm not mistaken, and I'm not mistaken, okay, cool. Later on, Professor Michaels plays Sergeant Moore, who is Angela's father. And that
I also thought was Tony Todd.
That's who I thought you were like I was like, oh, are we going to talk about like, I honestly didn't know. I was like, is he playing the same character? Like, will later on he be like the college professor who runs ROTC or whatever? Like I had no idea. But it turns out, no, he just comes back and plays a different authority figure. But good for him. Get those checks.
Okay, well, now that we're talking about him, separate from my mistaking his identity, what is his relationship to this show that he came back twice as two different characters? Because I always think it's really interesting how Boy Meets World just thinks no one's going to know this shit. Like, the fact that, Topanga has all these different parents and Shawn has these different siblings. And now it just seems like we have this character who was introduced to us as a college professor, but who later on, for some reason, isn't also introduced to us as a college professor. They could have very easily just made that Angela's dad.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Absolutely. I think some, like, I'm just gonna go off here, and who knows, like, we're just spitballing here. How I took it is he had chemistry with Ryder Strong. Like, there was something about him and something about his presence where he does just scream authority figure that Shawn would listen to. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
there, like, even the way that he dealt with Shawn in this episode, it was like, I understand you, I find you insightful, but also you don't know the basics and I don't have time to teach you. You know, I'm not Feeney, I'm not here to hold your hand type situation.
I did love his character, like his whole, like, I'm in college and, you know, I want to talk to you about really high level stuff, and just really communicating that to the audience that, like, hey, college can be fun and cool and you can get to talk about things you don't get to talk about in high school, but you gotta, you know, be able to survive, you know, writing MIA.
You gotta know
or
the basics.
MIL. What am I trying to say? I don't write
MLA format.
This is what I'm talking about. None of it matters.
Well, like, I mean, like, I think that's what's really important. Like, I mean, sorry guys, we're gonna have to go on a little tangent about college in general, because one of the things that I was bringing up is right now college is, I don't think, and I have no idea, if you're in college, please let us know and let us know how it's going for you. I'm like, no individual right now should be paying full price for their college tuition, because you're not getting the full college experience. Like, if you are
in a panorama, no way.
Exactly.
No.
During Pantene Pro V, if you are in college and you are paying full price, that just doesn't make sense, because you're not getting that in-class experience. You're not getting the campus. You're not getting the fraternity, like all the things that they are talking about right now, or they kind of highlight as, you know, signatures of college.
It's just the full college experience, like being online all the time. Like, I'm in Zoom meetings nonstop and I'm going crazy. And I remember just like, there were times in high school, especially, where like the only thing that was really getting me to school every day was the social interaction, you know? And now that we're just like in this pap smear, I can't imagine kids feeling like they're having any meaningful connections building in college right now. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe kids are finding a way through social media, but I would love to get some insight as well from current college students on that, because it just doesn't seem worth it. Even in general, maybe it doesn't seem worth it, depending on who you are.
No, like, I agree. Like, this is my point. My whole point is, I just wanted to point out that you should not be paying full price. If you are, please write your dean and be like, yo, what's up with that? But I think what's interesting about this episode is they do like two things. One, they do that whole situation to where college conversation is like written off as like, you can say anything in philosophy, and like that could be seen as like intellectual. And it's like, oh, you're challenging me here. It's like, oh, what happened? There's like this one scene where Professor Michaels says, talk to me about, like, argue with me about free will. And Shawn goes, do I have a choice? And he goes, oh, now I got to take a moment and just think about this. And it's like, okay, you know, like college can be like that. But also I think it's really important to realize you're talking about philosophy, and philosophy are those arguments. Is this a table? What quantifies as a table? What is now? What is this moment? What are we living for? What is purpose? Like, that is all of those things. But the majority of college is not a debate. You know what I mean? It's like,
no, yeah, like I have to say, I maybe had like one or two dead poet moments in college where it was like the discussion really got interesting, and I felt like, wow, this is so cool. Like I'm like expanding my mind and my worldview, all that stuff. The rest of it was like rushing to get papers done by 11:49 or 59. Like, that's what college mostly was for me. So I don't know.
Yeah, and I was in art school, and we had to do like, you were supposed to do like, I think for every hour class that you had in art school, you were supposed to do like 5 hours of studio work. That did not happen. Did not happen. I'm gonna tell you right now. But anyway, all that is to say that I do like, there is something about like having more of a debate and more of a conversation in your lesson plans. It's less of like sitting down and having the teacher just dictate to you, and more of like, okay, this is the curriculum. What do you guys think about that? How do you interpret it? Like, that's what you are doing more of in college than you are in high school. But also, as this episode points out, you don't just get to skip to that. You do have to understand the basics. And that was something that I remember you and we were in, what was it? I don't even remember what it was called, but we were in like advanced programs, and we had college dual enrollment. We had a college professor teach our high school class, or like a high school professor who also taught college courses. And I remember when I went to college, there were like people who I was like, how do you not know how to write a paper? It's like, you can just do things, and you're like, you don't know the basics, dude. Like, I was told that when I got to college, I'm gonna like have all these papers and all these things are going to be important. And then there were a bunch of freshmen who were like, I don't know how to spell. You know what I mean? Like,
you know what? I do have to say, to that point, is Shawn's issue that he doesn't know the basics, or that he doesn't have Grammarly? Guys, I'm here to talk to you about a new exciting program for you guys who, like Shawn, don't know how to spell or build a sentence. It's called Grammarly.com. They are not sponsors. I would love it if they threw some money our way, but that's basically what I'm saying. Like, Shawn is like that dude who's like, he can get by based on his street smarts, but he just doesn't have tools of the future to help him. So he has to go back and learn the basics from scratch.
Feeny pointed out that like one paragraph was an entire sentence. Like,
his whole essay was one sentence.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. And you're right, Grammarly. But I use Grammarly. I'm a huge advocate for it. So again, not sponsors, but if you want to be sponsors, let us know. All of that is to say, but you do need those basics. It's like, one thing that you and I have learned is if you don't have like the fundamentals, you automatically get written off as someone who doesn't know anything.
I was just gonna say, for Shawn's case too, they kind of generally say like, oh, he doesn't know the basics, and I'm assuming it's probably a lot more than just punctuation and spelling. I'm sure it's like his thoughts aren't written out cohesively. Like, there's other problems with it that probably wouldn't be able to get fixed with just a spell check.
Yeah, he most likely just writes in train of thought. Like, I, as someone who has to deal with people at work who write in train of thought, you're like, did you go back and like answer your own question in sentence one? Like you can edit. That's completely a possibility. But anyway, all of that is to say that I feel that it is important that this episode highlighted there are kids who are naturally gifted. There are those kids who like show up to class and they've never attended a single lecture, but then come in on the test and just ace it. And then there's also kids who like, I was one of these kids who they excel by going to the lectures. Like, most of my grades are not because of how I performed on tests, but because I was an active student in class. I knew who to speak to. I knew how to speak up. I knew how to ask questions and how to relate to the professor and let them know that I was engaged with the material. So whenever I took a test and it wasn't the greatest, they were like, you spoke about this in class, so I know that you get the overall idea, but this is where I feel you need to improve.
One of the things, and they do that with Shawn in a really great way in this episode, and I love that, his professor, who is not Tony Todd, and Feeney both are like, hey, like, there's some good stuff in here. There is encouragement. They're not just beating him down. They're just like, hey, you just need to work on this, and that. But overall, they're very supportive of the fact that, especially Feeney, is like recognizing that Shawn found something he's enjoying to learn. And I think that's kind of like the big shift that Shawn takes in this episode, is like, it's his first time finding a subject that's fun for him to learn, and learning became fun for him in a way. So much so that it like opened him up to go into college in a way that he never really strongly considered before. So that was really interesting to me. And just to say too, that it just feels like Shawn would find philosophy interesting based on his life.
You brought up two things I thought was funny. One was the idea that Shawn doesn't expect to go to college, even though he's living in a college like dorm or town or whatever. I thought that was really funny. And then also the idea that I think that this episode highlights that different people learn different ways.
Yeah.
And traditional, like this is something we always talk about with college, but also like the different, I know my sister's a teacher and she talks about this and the different ways that we approach teaching different students, and not everyone learns the exact same way. Like Shawn, like going to class the traditional outdated way that we've been doing things, where it's like you go, the teacher gives you an assignment, you have textbooks, you have homework, all this other stuff. That doesn't engage Shawn. College is engaging for Shawn. College is something that he feels like because it's more of a discussion. It is more of a, hey, this is how I'm interpreting what I'm hearing, and relaying it back and having those things happen. Whereas I feel very often students who feel like they're not smart or feel like they're not doing well in school are just like, that format doesn't work for them and they need something different. They need a different way. They need to either be hands-on or they need to be visual. You know what I'm saying?
Okay, so given all of that, do you feel like Feeney, like his approach was what Shawn needed?
Absolutely. I have a note here that says Feeney was done giving passes. And I think it's because instead of coming to Feeney and being like, hey, I've been in college courses, I'm relating to it more this way. Like instead of like having a conversation with Feeney, who has shown himself to be open, especially when it comes to Shawn was just like, I'm above this. I don't got to do any of this. And Feeney was like, oh, that's how it's going to be after I put in time? Nah, son, suspend it.
Shawn, when he was talking to Feeney, when Shawn Hunter was talking to the principal of his school without a single fuck, I was just like, this is just a different kind of relationship, because I didn't have that kind of relationship where I could just tell the principal of my school, yeah, I'm not gonna go to class, buddy. I'm busy doing my own thing. That just wouldn't even occur to me to throw out. So it just showed maybe a little bit of, what do we call it? White boy logic?
Oh, 100% white boy logic. Because this is what I was talking about. Remember, Feeney came out of class and said, hey, he didn't have to do that. Feeney was like, hey, are you coming to class? Like, this is a scheduled time. By the way, I'm still your principal. So like, let's just talk about like the amount of disrespect that you're showing right now in this moment. And Shawn was like, and what you gonna do about it? And Feeney was like, oh, I'm gonna tell you what I'm gonna do about it.
I'm gonna tell you what I'm about to do.
You suspend it. And again, it was really funny that Corey was like, you like, but it's Shawn, you know Shawn. And he's like, no, I'm constantly giving this dude passes. I'm constantly being understanding. If anyone knows, it's the person who has been riding with you since you were in 5th grade. So for you to treat me this way means that you don't respect me enough. And why should I give anyone an extension who doesn't give me the bare minimum? So I was like, also, Feeney's like, he's right.
He's right 100%. And he's also showing Corey that he cannot be an enabler to Shawn. Why is Corey still parenting Shawn? Like this, he was caught by Topanga and Feeney trying to write a letter on behalf of Shawn's parents. This is the kind of shit. This kid is way too involved in a way that's destructive. And I'm so glad that Feeney just like spotted it and shut that shit down.
Well, also like another thing, and this is really relevant right now, is the whole idea that freedom of choice does not mean freedom from consequences. Like
Yes.
Feeney was like, yo, you're right. You have freedom to say what you want to say and debate how you want to debate. But that does not exist in a vacuum. That exists in the real world. And in the real world, you come up to somebody with authority and say, this is how I feel about yours. There will be a reaction. And that reaction is not always positive. And I think that what we're dealing with now as a society is a bunch of white guys learning, hey, wait a minute, I have freedom of speech. It's like, you do, but not freedom from consequences.
Consequences, yeah. You could say whatever. Is it Chris Rock who has a joke? I don't know who has a joke who is like, they had to give you the freedom of speech, but the reason why the Second Amendment is the Second Amendment is the freedom to carry
right to arms.
The right to bear arms is so I can kick your ass for whatever you say. Like that's, I don't know who says the joke, but it's what I think of every time.
No, honestly, I just think that that's something that I feel whenever we talk about freedom of speech, or whenever any white guy, because that's another thing that I find really funny, is that of course Shawn, a white dude, loves college, where he gets to debate with the teacher and constantly like, oh, what do you think about this? And like, have you, like, you know, like it was like, of course this is a moment where he feels empowered. And we've all had that white boy in class who's like, how about like challenging the teacher with their own sets of rules and like being like, oh, I'm going to show you that I can think critically. And everyone's like, yo, that's not even the point of this right now. Just turn in your term paper, you know, like why does this have to be a debate or discussion? But
well, to that same idea of just like this, I wanted to mention Corey and Topanga's role in like getting the whole class in trouble because of their same attitude towards Feeney. Like, I like the fact that they kind of like owned up for it and was like, hey guys, you know what? We're sorry. We'll go ahead and buy you lunch. Like, we understand that we're the reason that you guys have to do this, and we apologize. Shawn obviously not taking kind of any role in anything else, but I did like that Corey and Topanga felt accountable.
Well, what do you think about that? Like the idea of like shared responsibility, and the fact that like, because Corey and Topanga kept talking, actually, so it was like because of Shawn's actions, Corey and Topanga kept talking, and therefore the entire class got an assignment. And I like, in some way, I'm like, yo, that's fucked up on everyone else's behalf, because he is punishing the rest of the class for Corey, Shawn, and Topanga's behavior. But also, it's a life lesson that in reality, I mean, again, what better example than
I think
the panna cotta to be like, yo, if one person's fucking it up, we all have to pay the consequences.
100%. And I think that Feeney especially is trying to be a little bit tougher. I think we're going to see that going forward. That Feeney is trying to be a little bit tougher on the kids their senior year of high school. He's like, I want to keep these kids on track. It's so easy for them to divert away from their track at the last minute. You know, there's so many, I think he even says to Corey, like, there's so many students I've seen who had all this potential that just never reached it. And, you know, there's a genuine worry that he has about these three kids in particular. It's almost as if he's like, I'm not going to be able to protect you after this year. So he's like, overcompensating maybe, but he is being like, he's just trying to teach these kids a lesson. And like, if it means giving everybody homework, then everybody's going to get homework. If it means that, you know, I know you guys are going to reach your potential. So it's Feeney laying down the law, but in ways I can respect.
Yeah, I just feel like there is some points to be made, especially again, there becomes this moment where I think any student feels like, oh, I know enough. And like, as the teacher, it is your responsibility to be like, you don't know anything. And you want to know how you don't know anything? Because I am a professor who's been doing this for years, and I don't know everything. So, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah. And you know what? That's such a great point, because towards the end of the episode, Feeney talking to Shawn is like, hey, you know, you have to learn the basics. And, you know, every now and then I'll throw in some Schopenhauer for you. And Shawn's like, what do you know about Schopenhauer? And Feeney says to him, you know, not as much as you do, but I'm still willing to learn. And like, this willing smile. It's a Michael Jacobs moment. It melted my heart. And it was such a great, beautiful Feeney moment, because in that line, he's telling Shawn, like, not only will I incorporate your interest into my lesson plans, but I want to show you that learning will continue to be fun if you allow it to, just like it's continued to be fun for me. And so I just thought that was a really beautiful Feeney ABC family moment.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. One more thing I have for the Shawn segment is there was a debate on how to properly spell Shawn, which I thought was really funny, just as the idea that Corey would be his best friend. It was like, we're phone people, we don't really like, there's that whole thing. I know that everyone has like this moment with your friend where we're like, what's their last name, you know, like, do I know how to spell this? Like, this is real. I'm embarrassed to ask, but I honestly don't know. And then it felt like a little bit meta to me, of like, I don't know whether it was like TV Guide or like a bunch of fan blogs, but it felt very like a meta moment that had something to do with the outside world, where they were like, is it SHAWN or SEAN? So anyway, it's SHAWN.
Yes, it is spelled with a W, which is good to know for us.
Yeah. And do you know who knew that? Feeny.
What I love was just that in general, I just found Corey to be really funny this episode. He was kind of the comic relief of the episode in a lot of ways. I also want to point out that Ben seemed surprisingly tall in this episode. Did you get that? Did you notice his height?
I just think that he's starting to like tower over Ryder Strong. And I think that's just one of the things. It's like they went from like Corey being shorter to like them being on equal length, and now they're like a little bit like it's clear that Ben Savage will be taller than Ryder Strong. So
yeah, I just thought Ben was really hilarious this episode. So
absolutely.
We talk about the fraternity stuff.
Let's talk about it.
Okay, so my main frustration with this storyline is that it could have been a very dope storyline, right? Like, I love this idea of like an alternative frat. Like, hey, traditional frats put you through a ton of humiliation. And, you know, obviously we're going to talk about the dress incident, but we'll come back to that. But, you know, I don't want to go through the hazing. I want to set up an alternative frat. That's a great idea. We've seen it done in a few films or whatever. Perfect for this show, right?
Yeah.
My question is, well, they don't ever do anything serious with the frat. The whole thing was to have a party with girls, which, by the way, that party had problems. I want to talk about that in a bit. Why does Eric have any interest in a fraternity? This dude specifically turned down a party school because he wanted to push himself to his full potential. Why does he give a shit about joining a frat, especially
girls.
Starting one? Like, and that's
Girls.
the thing. Like, he could have gone somewhere and got girls easy. I didn't think he was interested. The whole last season built up to him coming to that revelation.
Well, as we all know, as a teenage boy or as any individual, it takes you a while to break your patterns. You know, like we all go back to the same mistakes. Just thinking it'll be different and we learn a little bit more. But also, I think this is one of those segments to where the writers didn't think about Eric's story arc long term. They were just like, hey, this will be like a fun one-off thing to do, and it read as such. It felt very hijinks of the week.
Do you think that they had the Love Boat cameo before the storyline, or did they get the Love Boat cameo because of the storyline?
Okay, I have my answer. I'm going to go with the fact that they did have the Magnum PI joke. They had the fact that it was in Hawaii, and then someone was like, who could we get from Hawaii? Or like, what kind of TV characters could we bring back for this particular moment that would be relevant? Like, I feel like that's how it went. They definitely worked backwards, and they were like, who could we have that would be like significant of Hawaii, but also like be impressive for someone the Dean's age?
To me, it felt like they really wanted to get a Magnum PI cameo, but couldn't get it, and they were like, well, what's the closest thing?
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. It's like, what else is filmed in Hawaii? Like, that's how
we don't have like Hawaii 5-0. They're out. Okay, we'll do Love Boat. They've been to Hawaii, right? Like, that's what the vibe
and
is
again,
like.
Who's that joke for? That joke's not for anyone our age.
Thank you. That's the first thing I wrote down was, who is this joke for? Because even the studio audience doesn't seem to have an understanding of who these characters are, or their relationship with each other. Like, they're trying to banter back and forth, and as a kid, I'm watching this like, I don't know who these assholes are, and the audience is like, we kind of know who these assholes are. So I just felt very confused by the whole cameo. It didn't feel as genuine and as seamless as the Monkeys cameo from season 3.
I'm also going to say, and this is like, I could be completely wrong, but I feel like with white shows, when they do like a TV cameo, it's always like some older television show, and they're like, oh, hey, we got the cast of Bewitched, or the cast from MASH up in here. But when black shows do it, it's always like, yo, this is like the artist of the time. Like, if this was like a black
TV. Are you talking about Tupac being on a different world?
I'm just saying, like, if this was Moesha, you know, like Usher would have showed up, or like
Biggie on Martin.
Yeah, exactly. Like there's just so many times to where it's like, yo, we got someone fresh, someone that the kids would actually relate to. And so like I don't know who this would have been even at the time. I'm like thinking of like, what is this, like 97? So I can't even think of like what
I don't
band.
feel like they ever get like a cool young guest celeb. I don't think that ever happens on the show.
So I'm gonna I looked ahead and I don't know for sure, but I do believe next episode we get Sabrina the Teenage Witch. So like I mean like that's like TGIF crossover, but still.
Well, I mean, I think Candace Cameron makes a appearance this season
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's hip and young, but I mean, it feels like ABC just shuffling through their properties. They're like,
Yeah.
we own Love Boat, we own Sabrina. Yeah, sure, throw them in there. It all feels like marketing and crossover.
Yeah,
That's
it
all
feels
it
like
is.
crossover and less of like the, oh, hey, we did this for that like shock and that just paused moment of everyone being like, oh my God. But also we've seen this before. Like there are moments when they make the adult jokes in Boy Meets World where it's like, this is not for our generation. This is like
Yeah.
the generation above. Like, why are we referencing Grease right now? You know what I mean?
Yeah, and again, like this just felt like a show that had nothing to do with the storyline. Like, I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the Love Boat surprisingly has some, something to do with it. But as far as I know, this show ended in 1986.
Yeah.
So this is 10 years later.
Yeah.
Maybe some parents would get this. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. This is what I'm saying. So we do have to call out the whole gay panic moment. There are two moments that I was like, there are two moments that are like my bruh moments. One is, of course, like the whole there's like this gay panic moment where
Eric is in a dress.
Jack says that he's waiting for girls, or he's like trying to like meet girls in the hallway. Eric comes in a dress, but I will say Eric's like, yo, I feel good in this dress. Like, like there's not like a sense of shame. And yeah, that one, he's like, yo, you look good, girl. And she's like, you do too. He's like, yo, thank you. Like it's like an ownership. So it's not really gay panic there. But like with the dean, there's also this moment where Jack's in a dress and the dean keeps referring to some girl who he thinks Jack looks like. And like there's this whole moment where it's like, the moment you started speaking, I knew you weren't her. And I'm like, what are we trying to say here? Are we trying to say that she looks like a man? Are we trying to say that there is this like a coded trans joke? I don't know. It felt weird. It felt like uneasy. And I was like, I don't know why we're doing this at all.
For any listeners who are joining us for the first time or just start listening to us, I would really encourage you to go back and listen to our Chick Like Me episode that we did from season 4. We had a great guest, Sav, who was talking to us about the history of just trans and media and just, what's it mean when someone wears a dress for comedy and all that stuff. I would just really encourage re-listening to that podcast and then like thinking about this episode, because I think it's hard for me to see this, man wearing a dress as a joke thing in a way that isn't with open eyes since talking to him. So I guess that's my overall perspective of it, is that go listen to someone talk about it who's way more intelligent than I am on the subject, to just kind of know what was going through my head as I was watching it. Because it did seem like, especially with Jack, there was some attitudes about it that could be problematic. So
yeah, absolutely. I will say, like, I will give the episode credit that it, unlike Chick Like Me or like a later episode to where they're dressing up as women as like a Some Like It Hot reference, this was like directly stated as, we are being hazed. This is like part of that, but also for me, we all know that hazing comes in different stages, and hazes comes in different forms. And the fact that it's like consistently the dress thing is both supposed to be played for a cheap laugh. And like, I think, like, I know we're gonna get a lot of people who like feel bad, like who are messaging us about this. I'm just saying that in terms of comedy, aim higher. Aim
higher. Yeah.
Like you can be hazed in several different ways, and to take a cheap shot at like men in women's clothing just feels like you're saying there's something wrong with being feminine.
And I don't even attack Boy Meets World for it. It just seems like a product of the time But I will say that, from 2021 and even recently, I was reading in the news about a kid who got alcohol poisoning from college hazing. Like, there's so many interesting things you could have dove into with hazing that would have been more of a fulfilling storyline for Eric and Jack, like them actually having a somewhat dramatic moment of their own, perhaps, them kind of like overcoming something. I know Fresh Prince did a fantastic job tackling college hazing with Carlton and Will joining a black fraternity that didn't feel like Carlton was black enough. Great episode. This just could have done more because I don't feel like this storyline added anything to either the overall episode or their individual storylines. So
yeah, absolutely. And something else I just want to bring up right before we kind of wrap this up is that the guy who plays the dean, who is Paul Gleason, he's that traditional authority figure. He was the principal or like the dean in Breakfast Club.
Yeah, he was the vice principal.
Yeah, something like that. Anyway, authority figure. They also kind of like, we're still reacting, I'll say, to the 80s in the sense that he is like, there you get this Animal House like broy, like, hey, you and those girls wrap it up by the end of the night. You know what I mean? It's not like, hey, get rid of the girls, or like this is against. It's just kind of like, I'm gonna let you keep doing this till the end of the day, but you better wrap it up. You know what I mean? Like,
I really do not like his character. I decided this episode that they were trying to build this relationship between Eric and his dean, but all it does is just show the need for Feeney. Like that. Yeah. That's all I'm seeing. There's no chemistry. And unfortunately, this actor is great. Like, I love him in his films and he's done some great work, but I just don't see him having chemistry with Will Friedle or Matthew Lawrence. And I want Feeney and Eric together. Like, Eric and Feeney had such great chemistry that this just feels like, ugh.
Well, I think it's because it always feels Animal Housey. It feels like he's always like, it's just a hijinks. You know what I mean?
He's a thin character. He's not. He has no levels to him. There's nothing. I don't know. I guess maybe in this episode where he was talking about his mom, or seeing the stars of Love Boat, that was a little humor. But I don't know. Overall, I'm kind of bored with this character.
Also, really, really quickly, Paul Gleason did star on an episode of Magnum PI. I don't know if that's why they chose it or anything, but it is funny that he was on an episode of Magnum PI. Wow. And that's what they chose. So,
I really love the epilogue. I know we rarely talk about them, but this one actually made me laugh because, you have the guys from Love Boat and they're with the Matthews and they're just like, okay, one more story, just one more. And you think they're going to tell the story about the show or celebrity. And it's just the Matthews telling family stories to these celebrities. I thought it was a cute little joke. It made me chuckle. And I loved actually seeing the family together. I was like, we've been getting all this college stuff and it's good. Like, we never see Amy and Alan. And it was just kind of nice to see the family together. It's an element that I feel like we've been swinging back and forth in the pendulum of like having the parents, not having the parents. And I think we're on the side where I'm like, I think we need a little bit more Amy and Alan.
Yeah, I will also say it felt a little like this is clearly came after it, but it felt a little Modern Family, like a Modern Family epilogue. You know what I mean? Where it was just like,
absolutely.
They turned it on its head, where it's like, oh, it's the family who's telling the stories, and the guests are like, we have got to go. So I just thought that was really interesting. Okay, anything else? Anything you want to say?
No, that's it.
Okay. What is your Feeney taught me?
I think the Feeney taught me of this episode is, in order to go to the next level, you have to know the basics. Is that a good summary for it? I don't know.
I mean, like, that's yours. I mean, we don't have to have the same one. I was going to go. I mean, I like yours. I was going to go with freedom of choice does not mean freedom from consequences. Like, I feel like that's like all of these things is like, yeah, you can do what you want in college, but there will be repercussions. Like this isn't high school anymore, so to say. So there's that. Okay, and then
so your bruh moment was Jack's dress reaction, the whole gay panic?
Not just the gay panic. I told you mine was more so like the dean being like, yo, you look like this one girl. And just like, again, I couldn't read this situation. It felt very weird, just what he was saying about the girl that he kept mistaking Jack for.
Yeah. I don't
Did you
really
know
know that I
that?
had a bro moment, but I do agree that the dress thing made me kind of think about representation of men in dresses in media.
Exactly. Do you have what grade are you giving this episode?
I'm gonna give this episode a C.
I feel like C is accurate. I feel like C is dead on. Like, you have a lot of good potential, but you don't really bring it out of the park. You don't even do anything to really drive home. Like, I feel like we either needed more Shawn, or we needed the fraternity stuff to have like a different lesson. You know what I mean?
I think if, in retrospect, after finishing the season, there seems to be a growing arc of Shawn. Will he go to college? Will he not go to college? Back and forth. If that proves to be the case, just because I haven't seen the season in a while, then maybe this episode has more significance than I think now. But as of right now, I can do without it.
Also, I think, like you said earlier, if, like, from what I'm gathering, the what's his name? Julius Carey, who plays the Professor Michaels, the fact that he doesn't come back and end up, like, I thought that maybe he was the precursor to being Angela's dad, and like they were going to connect it somehow. But the fact that he's not also kind of takes it away, because it's not like you're building a story. You literally just had a guest spot and you were like, yo, this dude did it. So
The continuality errors. It's what Boy Meets World is known for. So
absolutely. Okay, so homework. What do you got?
all right. So my homework, I hate to sound corporate, bruh, but I'm gonna throw it out there for Paramount Plus simply because I got the 1 month free trial, and Paramount Plus has MTV's Diary, like 7 episodes of it, and it's fantastic. They have all these old MTV shows like Next and Beavis and Butthead and like all these old stuff, but they have Diary, and they have like 2 or 3 episodes of Behind the Music right now. But I hear that they're going to be adding brand new episodes of Behind the
They
Music.
need to be doing, like, yo, we all love
my
that show.
God.
Like, what more could, for me, when I found out they weren't, I was like, yo,
Yes.
there's no better time than right now to be doing Behind the Music. That's all we care about.
That's all we want is more Behind the Music. And I have to say, I was immediately very pissed off to find out they only had like 2 episodes on there. But when I learned that they were going to be adding brand new episodes, that completely changed it for me. Also, I think they're bringing back Rugrats as well. Like, there's just a lot.
They are.
That it's worth diving into, at least for the free trial.
I will say, I refuse to give. I just refuse to give Paramount or CBS the satisfaction. Like, that was me. I was like, I know, bro. To give them the satisfaction. But also, I had already done like the little trial to see the what was it called? Twilight Zone. Like, I had done like their week trial, so I don't qualify for their months. But I'm gonna get your login if you'll hand it to me and then watch it. But yeah, no. So I
watched. I will just say that I watched Nirvana's Unplugged episode yesterday and Alanis Morissette's Storytellers episode. Like, there's like from 90s, especially 90s MTV era vintage videos. There's a ton of memories to unlock. So that's why I'm throwing that out.
That's good. Also, you know what? I'm not gonna lie. Like, for me, in my opinion, what is it called? Like, Behind the Music was like, it was spoofed, it was parodied in so many things. That was like a cultural moment.
It was absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So there's that. And then my homework is I believe we've had this guest on the pod before, but if we haven't, my friend Peter Murphy has a new podcast called Florida Versus, where he talks to different creatives who like either used to live in Florida or like from Florida, and just kind of like talk about, Florida versus the rest of the world, and just how unique of a place Florida is. And the more like it is.
How do we get on this podcast? Because I got stories about Florida to dish out. Jesus.
was on this podcast. So
What?
if you check out this past week's episode, which would be I believe it's like March 3rd or March 2nd, you have me. I promoted our show. I'm promoting his show. We talked about a bunch of stuff about like going to college and like the unique college experience that is Florida. And then also it's a fun time, fun conversations. And we had this conversation. You'll love this, TC. Two things really quickly. One is that Florida is like, America is a very unique place in the entire world. Florida is the America of like all of America.
Yeah.
Like, it's just like it's even more unique in its space. And then also we were talking about like the racism in Florida, and I was like, the racism in Florida is like the humidity in Florida. When you grow up in it, you don't really recognize it, but when
Until
you
leave.
and come back and you're like, yo, this is what people were talking about.
Perfect analogy.
I thought you would love that. So,
Oh my gosh,
check it
Florida
out.
racism. Oh man, been a minute.
called Florida Versus, and it is on Apple Pod, Spotify, all of the places.
Yep.
Wrapping us up, thank you guys for listening to Bruh Meets World. Again, reach out to us on the platforms. We're at Bruh Meets World. You can find me on Twitter at I am not your Oreo. TC.
You can find me. Honestly, I just want you guys to follow us on Instagram and TikTok. That's actually where we've been getting a lot of interaction with fans. On TikTok, there's been a lot of great discussions in the comments. It's just been a lot of fun to interact with y'all. So yeah, follow us on TikTok.
All right. So you guys remember to dream.
Why?
And do good. We really need y'all to start doing some good.
Later, y'all.
Later, bruhs.
When this boy meets world.